Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to part 2 of the DIY solar kayak mini skiff. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I put together the pontoon outriggers and the elevated seat/dry storage. What you're going to need for this is the insulated foam board. You can get that at Home Depot. You're going to need an old cooler. You're going to need your seat with the swivel base, some fiberglass mat, some latex based paint that does not have any kind of acetone or petroleum based solvents in it. Whatever paint you choose, make sure you test it on the foam before you commit to it, because a lot of solvents will dissolve the foam. You're going to need some resin. The fiberglass resin is one of the solvents I was referring to that will dissolve the foam, which is where the paint comes in. You're going to need some rails. These are just aluminum C-channel. The rails are going to be used to connect the pontoons to the kayak. You're going to need various tools, including a box cutter or a razor knife to cut the foam, an orbital sander with some low grit sandpaper to help shape the pontoons after they're put together. And I'm going to be testing the expanding foam adhesive to see if this is good enough to stick it all together. And then there will be some various odds and ends that you need that I will bring up as I figure out what they are, because I have actually never done this before, so I'm kind of making it up as I go. And if you're seeing this video, that means whatever I figured out was a success, and if you do it this way, it should work for you as well. Okay, so this is just a piece of 1-inch thick foam insulation board. It's closed cell insulation, so it will float and more or less waterproof, or at least water resistant for long periods of time. So they're going to be 8 inches tall and pretty close to 4 feet long. This board is flexible, so I'm going to bend the board around to give it kind of a catamaran style shape where it comes together at a point like that. Now that we have all of our angles cut, we can move on to the next part, which is making some shorter 8-inch wide boards. And to do that, I'm going to use the most accurate measuring system in the world. I'm going to take this 8-inch wide plank, get it lined up with the end here, and then just score along the edge. After you have the scores in there, just like with the factory scores, they should just break right along the score line. Now we have 3 8-inch by 16-inch planks. So I'm going to cut these into 6-inch strips and use them as spacers for the pontoons. Come through and score it. Break it off. We've got these 2 blocks, and what I'm going to do with these is take the side of our pontoon. This should be 4 feet long, which it is almost exactly 4 feet long. So I'm going to take this foam block, right? And because it's 1 inch thick, the edge should line up with 24.5 inches on one side and 23.5 inches on the other side, and that should be the middle point between both edges. Just felt like a score mark so I could line it up again. I actually want the top of the pontoon to be just a little bit wider than the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure 1 inch in from either side. Now that we got it lined up and cut to shape, I'm going to take this expanding foam and apply it to both sides. After you let the foam dry a little bit so it stiffens up, you go ahead and measure out or mark the next board where it's going to go. Then get that lined up. And then this one is going to be a little bit more difficult because you're upside down. I didn't necessarily think this through. I need a way to hold this up until it completely dries. So I think just fill it in from the top of the foam to the bottom. Yeah, so that's kind of what that looks like for now. I'm gonna let that dry for a bit, try to get the other side done, and then I will be back when I'm ready to move on to the next part. If you guys remember back towards the beginning of this video, I said that I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm kind of just making it up as I go along. Well, turns out I made a mistake. So if you look here, these kind of don't come together evenly. And these are cut the wrong direction. So, plus with the slant, I need to cut it back a little bit so it folds in evenly. So what I'm going to do is cut an angle from the corner of this to about 2 inches back. And on the other side, because it's about an inch overlapping, I'm going to cut from 1 inch in at the top to 3 inches in at the bottom. And then I will begin shaping it from there to where I can close these pontoons and get the actual pontoon shape that I'm looking for. So now these two should come together like that. And you can see the shape that the pontoon is going to be. But I'm going to get the orbital sander and then shave down this inner edge to where it fits kind of flat together. And then I'll start shaping the nose to make it more round. Okay, so once you have the rough shape done, you can kind of see how it's going to come together. I'm going to have to repeat that process on the other side of this and both sides of the other one. Having to cut off the edge like that is going to make these pontoons about 2 inches shorter than I wanted them to be, but 2 inches has never really made that big of a difference, has it? So after I shaped the edges of the pontoons so where they come together to an angle like this, I tried to use some of the paint to glue the ends together, but that ended up not working. So I decided what I'm gonna do. Gonna leave the duct tape on here to hold the ends together, and I'm just gonna fill the whole thing with this expanding foam to make sure that it doesn't just pour over the sides. I'm going to cut out the cap that goes across the bottom here. I'm just going to take this Sharpie and after I have the top and bottom traced out like that, I'm just going to cut them out. It just fits right on top like that. This is the bottom of the pontoon. I have it turned upside down right now, but so I'm just going to start spraying this in there. Alright, Alright, so while I was putting together the second one, this first pontoon was over here curing, and as it turns out, this foam expands quite a bit. It kept expanding. So as you can see here, as the foam that I put inside the pontoon was curing, it expanded and bubbled out the side. So it kind of has like a bubbly shape here. It's really bad up here. You can see how much it sticks out. So I'm gonna have to shave all this down to make it as smooth as I can. Alright, now that I've got them sanded and shaped, it's time to start applying the paint. So I'm just using, again, this white latex based paint. It doesn't have any solvents that dissolve the foam, so I'm just going to roll it on. After shaping and painting the pontoons, you can see that there's a gap here now. And if you look down from the top, you see the wall sticks out further than where I had it shaped, and or you can see it sticks out further than where it was coming together with the top of the pontoon. And that's because the expanding foam inside the pontoons continued to expand for several days after I thought it was done curing. So what I'm having to do now, and what I started to do on this other one, is I took the top off. I took the top and bottom off. As you can see, I'm carving out some of the foam inside so the walls will be flexible again. And then I'm trying to figure out a way that I can shape them and then hold them in their shape long enough to get the fiberglass on, because once the fiberglass is on, they won't be able to expand or move anymore. But like as you can see on this one, it lines up again. The top like has a smooth side across the bottom. It's not bulging out the sides over here. So I'm just taking this saw, cutting down into the foam, and then just carving it out with whatever I can use to get in there. So my advice for anyone who wants to do this, do not try using this expanding insulation foam as a gap filler, like to fill these whole cavities, or if you do, it's going to take a long time. Do one layer, like one thin layer, let it cure, then go back and keep stacking layers, letting them fully cure in between. Otherwise you're going to end up with the same problem I am, where you're having to take apart your pontoons and then try to figure out how to fix it without having to completely start over from the beginning. Alright, now that I've got them reshaped and all of the edges lining up, I've kind of wrapped them in masking tape to help cover the like the gaps that were here at the nose, and then some of the gaps that were still left behind from the walls not being cut completely flat. But their shape is good enough for how I want it, and I'm just going to lay a couple thick layers of paint over it. Just going to paint right over the masking tape, and then they will finally be ready for me to coat them in fiberglass. Okay, so it's been a while since I've made any progress on this project. Probably been about a month or so since I've done anything, but I've got a bit of time on my hands now, so I'm going to go ahead and try to get this knocked out and finish it up. Basically what I'm doing right now is, now that the paint is dry on these pontoons and they are shaped and sealed, I'm going to be taking these 4-foot 1 1/4 inch by 1/16 thickness angled aluminum bars, and then I'm going to be mounting them onto the top of the pontoons Gonna turn them into like a square shaped bracket that will allow the pontoons to mount into the rails right here on the side of the kayak, and also give the solar panels something to rest on. So pretty much what I'm doing is I cut this piece into a 1 foot strip, and then I centered it side to side and front to back on the pontoon. Cut these side rails into 2 foot sections, drill a hole to where, or this screw right here will go through both of these. And I'm also gonna put a rivet in to hold these together, make them square. And then on the other side, I'm going to rivet both of them together. And then after I get the frame built, I will show you what I'm gonna do from there. Okay, now that everything's cut, this is gonna be the basic shape that I want it in. As you see, it's a 2 foot by 1 foot box. So, line up your drill bit, and you got punch. Pick up your drill bit. You're looking at it, doing that first right in. With this main right in. And multiple. Then go all the way through this one, but either way, just put a hole in the top of your head. Try to get on. Here. So now that's it. That is the frame put together. This end will be connected to the pontoon. This end will mount right on these rails. I'm going to show you how I intend to mount it to the rails. First thing I'm going to do is measure 3 inches in from either side. Now that I've got them marks 3 inches in, put a mark roughly halfway through. Got a couple of these little guys. They're just wing nuts and these slide locks. So what I'm going to do is put the wing nut through here and put this guy, thread it on just a couple times. Then to put the frame on, you just align them, and then as you can see, that is the frame. So as you can see, both brackets are on now. I'm going to see if with both brackets on, if it's wide enough to support the 220 watt solar panel when it's folded all the way out. Alright, so as you can see, the 220 watt panel is folded out. It's basically completely flat, and we just have a little bit of overhang off the end of this bracket. But if I have the seat sitting right here in front of the panel, I still have all this area up here to do my fishing and do whatever I need to do without the panel being in the way. The next thing that I gotta do is get these pontoons fiberglass. I have never done any fiberglassing before, but I'm going to kind of do what I saw on another YouTube video and see if following what that other person did, if I can make this work. Alright, so as you can see, the fiberglass is done on both of the pontoons. I still need to go through and clean up some of these spots, get rid of all of this, and maybe do some light sanding on a couple of the raised areas. It does look like in places the resin was starting to dissolve the foam a little bit even through the paint, so it's kind of textured on the sides now. Alright, while I wait for the paint to dry on the pontoons, I'm going to start preparing the seat and storage. For this, I'm just going to be using an old igloo cooler that I have. I'm a little over 230 pounds, and this cooler can support my weight sitting or standing on it, so it shouldn't be a problem for average size guys to use this as a seat. But I wanted a backrest, so what I'm going to do is use this Swivelly's seat mount, and I'm just going to use this basic seat, but it's got a backrest and the padded seat part. I'm going to be running a strap through these scupper holes, and the idea is to run the strap inside the cooler, but you can see here there's not really a gap right there. And when it's closed, there's a really small gap. So basically, all I'm gonna do is get this saw and cut a small opening right here that the strap can fit through. Cutting another notch right here in it, that way the lid would close because the strap was pulling it too tight and it was squeezing the top right here. But now that the strap is there, alright, so the idea is to have the battery and the electronics inside the cooler, but as you can see, the cable's coming off the motor controller, which I want to mount right here on the front of the cooler so I could still reach it. and the cables coming from the solar panel. I can't close the lid if I have them there. So just like I did with this strap, I'm going to cut a couple of notches. It's pretty easy. You just take this thing. The wires are good. And on this side, the wires are good. I'm just gonna get a piece of Velcro, stick it to the back of the motor controller, and then I could Velcro it to the front of the cooler. But if you look on the inside, everything's hooked up, all the wires are out of the way. Still got space for storage right here. And the lid is good to go. Okay, so when I first put this seat together, I cut this hole out and then drilled these holes so I can mount the swivel base right here directly to the lid. And that ended up, like, it was fine if I sat up straight, but as soon as I leaned back, you could see this crease mark right here. And up here in the corner, it kind of started to collapse in. So I got a hole saw, cut out this hole here, and I'm moving the seat over into the center of the lid. And what I'm gonna do is take this piece of foam board and I'm going to cover it in fiberglass, and then that's going to get mounted directly to the top of the lid, and then I will remount the seat in the middle. And then for the inside of the cooler, I'm actually going to put this divider in right here and fiberglass that in to where there's no line right here, like no gap for any water to get through. So on one side I'll have enough room for all of the electronics. The battery will stay dry, the charge controller, everything will stay dry, and I could still use this side as a cooler if I wanted to, or just more dry storage. But with the way this is, it stops the battery from sliding back and forth. And if I set anything right here, it can't move this way either. This is what this ended up looking like. It's not pretty, but when it cures, I can come back through and clean up a lot of the mess and then paint over the whole thing. Now that this fiberglass is dry enough to be workable, I took a hole saw from below where I had put the previous hole and put it through, and then came back in from the top and put it back down that way. Now I have a hole that goes all the way through, and the seat pedestal can sit in there, getting it lined up how I want it with the hole. And then I'm going to take the drill and kind of mark where it's supposed to be lined up. So I grabbed some of these. They're 3-inch long. They have the tapered head, so they'll fit down in here. And then I got some wing nuts and washers to go up on the underside. Put a washer on. Put a wing nut on. And then when all 4 of these are on, I'm going to go back through with the screwdriver and tighten these down. And then just like I did with the pedestal mount, I'm going to go through to each of the corners and put one of these bolts. I've got the pedestal mount on, I've got the 4 bolts in, and I've got a really not the best looking white sealant sprayed on there. Then on the inside, I also sprayed the white sealant on the divider that I made. So all this is just drying and curing. The bolt, as you can see, just come in off to the side of the divider, so I don't have to worry about that breaking. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the cooler. The only thing left to do is to mount the motor control box. Okay, so here it is. I was able to get the pontoons finished. This one's a little bit crooked, so it might cause some tracking issues, but I'm not really concerned about that right now. I ended up adding another set of bolts to hold this flat against the thing. The one straight line caused it to be a little bit shaky and wobbly. Also, I ended up adding a second rail next to the rail that came factory installed. That way the pontoons are a little bit more stable. Because as you can see, it doesn't really move a lot, but before I was able to pick it up like all the way up here when it was just connected to the one. I have the motor speed controller mounted right here on the front. It's just Velcroed on, so it comes off if I want to use it with a different kayak. But It's pretty secure in place right there. Then I added this piece of fiberglass foam over the top of the cooler and mounted the swivel seat to it. Seat turns. I ended up getting a couple of these strap mounts that just go into the factory rails because I didn't want to keep running the strap through the scupper hole because too much pressure on the scupper holes can cause them to crack. And then inside you can see it has the divider that I fiberglassed in. The electronics are on this side kept dry, and then on this side I could use it either as a cooler or just for more storage. And then back here, kind of the main point of the arms and the stabilizers is the solar panel. This is a 160 watt solar panel, and when it opens up all the way, you can see it doesn't hang over the side of either of the pontoons. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. All I gotta do now is vacuum up all the dust and metal shavings from when I was working on this, and then install the steering. But I've installed steering in several videos, so if you want to see how I'm doing that, you can go check that out. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this out on the water and test it. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. I will catch you on the next one.